The London system has taken the chess world by storm in the last decade, becoming wildly popular among players of all levels. Even the current 2023 World Chess Champion Ding Liren played it against Nepo on the World Chess Championship. As you sit down to play as black, you know you'll encounter this strategic beast on the other side of the board. But wait, don't be worried. Embrace the challenge and get ready to learn this wonderful opening. And hey, guess what? The tables might turn in your favor. After watching today's thrilling video, you'll discover how to unleash your own counterattacks and crush your opponents when you wield the London system as white. It's not just a solid and flexible pawn setup, it's a powerful tool to use to dominate the chessboard.
First of all, what the London system is. It arises after the white's first move pawn to d4. And after that, the white setup is going to be something like this. White is putting this rock-solid pawn structure in the center that really secures them against any early attacks from black. As you can see, the white setup is very straightforward because they will play these moves against almost any responses from black. This makes it appealing for many players to play it as white because there is really no need to study any theory. Simply repeating the same setup is all that is done here. As you can see, white only has one pawn on the 4th rank, so it doesn't first appear to be that aggressive, despite the fact that some people find this opening to be a little bit dull for white. There are a lot of hidden opportunities for a sharp attack, and I'm going to show how white can achieve it. The first thing to note is that white's knight is able to hop to e5, landing on the center's stronger square. After this, the position of black is under a lot of pressure as a result. And it's not as easy for black to deal with it because they obviously cannot just trade the knights here in the center, because after that, white recaptures with a double attack to the black's minor pieces, thus winning one of them. Therefore, it is obvious that black cannot choose that. Therefore, we must go back, and if black attempts to capture on e5 with a bishop, this is a bad trade because, in general, bishop is a bit stronger than a knight. And secondly, after the same recapture, once again black is facing uncomfortable situation with the knight, it probably has to go back on more passive squares. And there are some drawbacks of this as well, which we're going to be looking at just in a moment. Black played queen to c7, trying to put more pressure onto this knight and trying to get rid of it, but white provide even more defense. Black decided to castle. White played bishop to d3. That's another interesting thing here to pay attention to as the white's bishop from d3 looks at the black's king and in some lines, once again it gives white a chance to begin an attack there. Alright, anyway, let's continue with the game. Black played knight to d7 here, trying to finally get rid of that strong knight on e5. And here, instead of trying to keep fighting for the center, white all of a sudden shifted their attack towards the kingside. They played knight to g5. And now the pawn h7 is at danger. Black played pawn of g6, trying to close the diagonal for the white's bishop. But white nevertheless just went forward, and here black is losing because after king takes, white can go queen to h5 check. Taking advantage of the pin, therefore the queen cannot be captured. The king has to go back, and after that, white just keeps chasing the king until it is checkmated in a line like this. So while going over this game, we just saw a couple of interesting ideas for white here that even though this setup looks simple and somewhat more defensive for white initially, in fact, white has some hidden chances to begin a sharp attack and therefore you definitely need to know how to deal with it. In this next game I will show you an interesting trap that most average players fall into. So the white's first moves are looking similar to the previous example. And in this position, instead of the move which is expected to be played pawn to c3, you can also go knight to c3, which looks like just a development move. And very often in this position, black continues by playing the standard move pawn to d5. But in this position it's actually a losing mistake because white has a winning shot, knight to b5. There is no defense for black, against the white's knight, going to c7 with a double attack to the black's king and rook, and black is destroyed. Let me also show you another interesting trap. We so far analyze the move pawn to d5, which loses after white goes knight to b5. And therefore, if black does not play pawn to d5, sometimes they go queen to b6, taking advantage of the fact that the white's little bit premature development of the dark square bishop left the b2 pawn unprotected. And black often tries to seize the initiative by attacking that pawn after playing queen to b6. And here you can play pawn to a3, just like pretending that you are unaware of the black's intention. And if they are naive enough to capture the pawn, you go knight to a4 and all of a sudden the queen is trapped right there on b2. and therefore on the next move you're going to simply capture it. A somewhat similar trap may happen in slightly different variation, but it's actually even trickier and therefore, you definitely need to know this. So in this case, black goes queen b6 in this position. As you can see, the position is slightly different. Black plays queen b6 right away without playing knight to c6 first or pawn e6 first. They're trying to attack you right away. And again, at first it seems a little bit uncomfortable for white to deal with this threat, as putting your queen to c1 is just too passive. The queen is not supposed to just protect a pawn. Or if you go pawn to b3, that also weakens a whole bunch of these dark squares in your position, and potentially in the future, black can also bring their bishop to b4, their knight to e4, and try to take advantage of those weaknesses. But you can go knight to c3, sacrificing the pawn, and after they capture you'll play knight to b5. Still at first it looks strong, but then black thinks, okay, there is no problem here for me because I can simply go knight to a6 and cover that c7 square. So white cannot go knight c7 anymore. And now it looks like white actually miscalculated something. They just lost the pawn for nothing and his threat was stopped. But there comes rook to b1, forcing black to take the pawn. After that, rook comes back to a1, attacking the queen. Once again, queen b2 is forced. And now you can see why white wanted to give up their pawn on a2 so badly. They can now take the knight on a6, eliminating the defender of the c7 square. And after that, they can finally jump with their knight to c7, attacking the black king and the rook. And after that, you can either just go ahead and take the rook, which is already very good for white, or which seems to be even stronger for me. You can play knight to g5, threatening f7, and you just hit the black's king from another side, and as you can see, black is devastated. You're attacking them all around and you're going to capture just literally everything in their position. A very hidden and very powerful trap. This next game also illustrates a really unique and interesting, fascinating trap. One of the most beautiful traps I ever saw. The game is between Kamsky playing white against Shankland, and both of them are really strong grandmasters. We can see that white came to this position with slightly different move order because it doesn't really make a big difference. White just uses the same setup pieces anyway. And here, while black proposed an exchange of bishops, white made an interesting move, bishop to g3, inviting black to capture. I would really recommend this move because in this case, white would open up the h-file for his rook and starts putting pressure onto the black's position, and if black decides to castle kingside, he would be in a lot of trouble. Therefore, in this game, black just castled. And white played knight to d2. Black played queen e7, another typical move which makes sense, generally speaking. If black can break through with pawn to e5, this will reduce the white's chances of occupying the e5, and it will also free up black's light squared bishop. And the black's position will be just great. And therefore, white blockaded by his own knight with knight to e5. We already saw in the previous example that this e5 square is really the key in many variations of the London system. Black goes knight d7 because what else can he do? He still needs to fight that knight on e5. And if someone goes into this line against you, then little do they know, because you've got a really, really beautiful combination here. After a couple of exchanges where it looks like white is just giving up the pressure and black has now no problems whatsoever, this is exactly the moment where you may say something like this.
Oh, call an ambulance! Call an ambulance! But not for me!
Bishop takes h7. Big surprise for black. After king takes you go queen h5 check. King goes back to g8. And at first, it looks like the white sacrifice made no sense at all. And the white's attack is over. But you continue with knight to e4, a very interesting tactical idea. At this point you are taking advantage of the pin along the 5th rank. And therefore the black's queen is attacked and the white's knight cannot be captured due to the pin. Queen moves. But now this knight jumps to g5 and finally we can see the white's idea. They're simply going to checkmate black with queen to h7, checkmate. And it's not that easy for black to stop this. In the game he played rook to e8, white took on f7, black played king to h8, and in the actual game, white played rook to d1. And white won the game later on. But you can simply capture the bishop and that would give you an advantage just as well. Queen can take on b2 but black king is very weak, which will be a long-term problem for black. And most importantly, you just took back that bishop on d7, which you sacrificed previously. Therefore, everything is just very favorable for white here. Now let me share with you one more common pattern in this opening. Again, these are not just traps. These are common ideas that can be used in different lines of this London system. For example, in this case, we can see slightly different beginning which still came to the very same position we already saw previously. Black in this case, decided to take an e5 right away, and this is also something that a lot of players do because again, it's uncomfortable for black to face this dominating knight on e5 and it's natural for them to want to exchange it. So after they take, you take with a pawn. Now, they have to move this knight backwards because it's being attacked. They play knight to d7. Now, the white's pawn on e5 was under the attack, so white protects it. Black goes queen to c7. Blacks attack the e5 pawn 3 times with their knights and queen. And white only protects it twice. And there is no way for white to provide an extra support for the pawn. And therefore black will just happily grab the pawn on the next move and will get a winning position. But fails due to another tactical motif, which is bishop takes h7. And yet in this particular position, it's somewhat natural for black to go into this trap because all the previous moves of black are very natural. You continue with knight to g5. Check. Attacking the king. The idea behind this move is that if black goes king to g8, you continue with queen to h5. And we already saw this in one of the previous examples. It's actually a pretty common tactical motif which happens in various different openings, not only in the London system. White is threatening queen to h7 checkmate. Therefore, black needs to give some space for their king, but after that, white just keeps chasing the king. And after the following variation like this, the black's king is checkmated. Let's go back after the white's bishop was sacrificed. So here comes bishop to h7. Check. Black recaptures. You go. Knight. g5 check. We already saw that king of g8 loses after queen to h5, and therefore black may also try to go with their king forward. They cannot really go king to h6 as that would expose the king to some potential discover check. For example, white can take knight takes e6 check to the king, and after that grab the queen. Therefore this line is just totally losing for black. And that's why let's take a move back and try to see what happens if black's king goes forward to g6, which is probably the strongest response of black. And you really need to know how to handle this position, as it looks like white is almost winning because the king is so much exposed. And yet you need to know the right way to continue the attack, because a lot of players in this position just go ahead and play queen g4, which is tempting to put your queen against the king, but it's actually a very bad mistake because black can play knight to e5 attacking the queen, and all of a sudden the situation is totally unclear. Therefore, queen g4 is just very bad, and let's take this move back instead. What you should be doing here is playing queen to c2 check. This precise check really wins the game. Now the king still cannot go h5 because of queen to h7. In this case, just checkmate. Alright, so the only way black can really do is to play pawn f5. But the problem here is that after white takes the pawn by en passant, black's king is under the check and also the black queen is attacked. So that's the problem, and after they move the king, you can give this check to save your knight, and after that grab the queen, which will give you a winning position. Very useful tactical motif to know in the London system.
Remember that while openings are essential in chess, they are just one aspect of the game. As you progress in your chess journey, it's essential to study and understand various aspects of the game, including tactics, strategy, endgames, and positional play. Embrace the spirit of learning, analyze your games, and keep experimenting with different openings and variations. Chess is a vast and fascinating world, and the journey of improvement is a lifelong one. So, whether you're just starting to explore the London system or have been using it for some time, I wish you the best of luck in your chess games. May you enjoy the beauty and complexity of the game as you continue to grow and develop as a chess player. Keep playing, learning, and having fun on your chess games. This is Chess Lumpia. Have a good day.